Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you today?
Are you recovered from our little...
Slightly.
Slightly. We had a good conference. So I met a lot of new people.
Yeah.
And there were young people there, which I always enjoy. And there were old people who looked very young. But we also got to visit with our friend that we rely on, and I certainly have known for a long time. And as, of course, Lou Rockwell was there.
Yeah, it was
and
great.
he gave a talk, and that was good. And also, the crowd was pretty darn friendly,
Yeah.
and I know we were able to even introduce some people. We thought, oh, you might like to meet so and so. And the atmosphere I thought was very good, and I think. I know they would never come up and say, this program isn't going well. We, of course, got the other. They came up, and we had a lot of people compliment us on all the speakers that we had. And the day went quickly, so I was very pleased with it. We might do it again someday. Who knows?
We might. No, it was a great event, and as I announced when we started, one of the great things about it is our second Houston conference. And this time was 3 times the size of our first one.
Wow.
So the room was packed. I think you can agree with that. It was packed. There was a lot of great people. And in fact, we had a little break because we know that people like to get up and talk. And we actually extended it from 30 to about 40 minutes. And we had a hard time settling it back down for Lou's speech. So it was a big group. It was a big crowd. We had people come from all over. We had actually... A couple of brothers drove down from Canada, super nice guys. Baltic Toma, he wanted to bring his wife, Evelina, but she couldn't make it, so he wanted us to say hi to her. So they say they watch the show every day, and so I'm happy to do that. And they're terrific guys, a lot of terrific people. You're right, everyone seemed happy. But I'm also always acutely aware of constructive criticism and how we can do better. And so in our little reception afterward, I was talking to a group, what do you think about this? So I always want to approve it. I always want to make it more enjoyable and informative. As you say, people should have fun. They should learn something. And if we put the two together, I think that is the perfect mix. And I think we get a little closer each time. We try to add things. And so it was a great group. I want to do a little show and tell just to give people an idea of what it looked like. And let's put up Scott first. This is Scott Ritter. He gave a tremendous talk. Biden's mouth is writing checks that the United States body can't cash. It was a great speech. Everyone enjoyed it. Let's do the next one, if we can, and that's the crowd. I think if we can just put on the next conference photo that we have. I'm not sure which one it is. Here's Lou Rockwell speaking, sitting down. You can see the crowd in the background. You see. Carol Paul, we know her. There she is. Great group. Let's do the next conference picture. It doesn't really matter which one it is. Here's someone we all know, Dr. Paul, making an emphatic point, and with our great little conference logo there. And the last one is another good one. And if we can, just put this one up. I like this picture a lot, and we'll put it up on our site. Dr. Paul delivering a strong point to a big crowd. And really, Dr. Paul, the pictures don't do justice to the size of the room. It was a very big room. It was absolutely full. Good hotel this time. So anyway, I was just really happy with how things went. And I just left with a good feeling. 5 very different speeches, all touching on this theme of what is happening to this country and what kind of danger we're in. So I always have my batteries recharged.
What that picture made me think of was we were less political at this convention than we were during politicking, because somebody would sneak up behind me and then take the picture, and they had the crowd too.
Yeah.
So we're not into politics; we're into education. So, but anyway, it was a very good group, and so we all had fun there. Want to move on to something that is disturbing to me because it's a reversal of a tradition, although not acutely so, but it definitely is some reversal, and that is the headline at Anti-War is NATO to kick off Baltic war games with Finland and Sweden.
Yeah.
You know, and they're getting ready. They want to be in. They want to be taken care of. They want to be in NATO. They want the American people to pay for it. That sort of thing, and that to me was disappointing. But also. It invites a response also too. This doesn't go unnoticed with Russia.
Yeah.
You know, and Russia. Matter of fact, I think Putin says, I'm not sitting here worrying about who's going to join NATO, and some days we don't sit and worry about that. Is what the policy is, and what we're doing is what it is, and that is almost what Putin is saying. He said, they can be there, but they better not do what. He didn't say these words, but what he was saying was, they better not act like Ukraine, say one thing, and agree in principle that they won't be moving weapons right up on the Russian border, and that's what he warned them about. In Scandinavia, Finland, yes, fine. Well, we're not going to say much about you joining NATO, and these war games are just sort of intimidation. Why do it? If you know what's going on, if there are problems, why can't this be solved with a little bit of discussion? Be diplomatic. But instead, it's always innuendo. Who's the strongest? And look us up. And look at what we have. How many countries were represented there? 16 or something like that. Everybody just to show. And let's say there was a skirmish on the border up there. How many of those 16 countries are going to all of a sudden be up in Scandinavia? Nobody's going to pop up there, and except the American taxpayer would be the one that would be responsible.
And Russia is upset about this, and people might come back at our position and say, well, why do you care what Russia thinks? Why would you base our own military posture on whether or not another country likes what we do or not? And we would agree with that to a degree. We shouldn't base our defensive military posture on whether or not we irritate any other country, obviously. But we should base our military posture on whether it actually reflects a legitimate U.S. national interest. And launching a bunch of weapons on the border with Russia has absolutely nothing to do with keeping LA safe, right? Keeping New York City safe, keeping Topeka, Kansas safe. It doesn't reflect in any way the needs to defend our country. And so that's our objection, not the objection that we might irritate someone far away. It's just that it's an unnecessary irritation.
But he was specific in talking about weapons, American weapons. We financed it. He wasn't saying, that American soldiers were doing it, or if we participated, it would have to be, very direct, which the Americans right now won't. We're not going to do that. We're going to try to follow Putin's direction. But that was supposed to be what would be happening, in Eastern Europe and also in Ukraine. But all of a sudden they went over and we got the weapons, and everybody knows we pay for them. And those weapons don't come cheap. And keeping the military-industrial complex, that's a large group of people. We have to keep them happy, and the only way to keep happy is give them about $1 billion a week.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, so far it's probably more than $1 billion a week since we've been involved over there now.
Well, that'd keep me happy too. So if they want to keep me happy, I'll take $1 billion a week. I'll take $1 billion a year.
Yeah.
But it's Balt Ops 22 is the name of the exercise, and I think we have just a picture of this exercise. Baltic operation kicks off, if we can put that up as a visual. And it is 7,000 troops, as you say, 16 countries, including, I don't know if we have that picture of the Baltic, the picture of the ships in it, I think is the one. There we go. Our clips got mixed up, so it's my fault, not our friends behind the camera's fault today. Exercise Baltic operation kicks off in the Baltic Sea. There are the ships getting ready to sail. 7,000 troops, 16 countries, and as you say, including Sweden and Finland this year. Sweden is actually hosting this event. Neither of the two of them are NATO member countries. They have been traditionally neutral. That neutrality is now going by the wayside, which is a big problem. And I think this is a great argument for why Sweden and Finland should not be allowed in. The Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, she said, "This just shows that Biden's security assurances are backed by actions." Well, that's stupid because we're risking a world war for Sweden, which we shouldn't do. And the other thing is NATO, as you know, we keep hearing it over and over. We've heard it for years, for decades. NATO is a defensive alliance. We're not out there bombing. We're a defensive alliance. Well, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, kind of put the truth out there inadvertently. He said the purpose of this exercise is a show of force to Russia. So much for we're just defensive. We're there to show force. We're there to show aggression toward Russia. And again, the question is, what's the purpose? Why? How does it serve America's national interests?
Hardly. In addition to the Swedish Prime Minister promising that they will respond and they will be looking for help from us, this shows that President Biden's assurances are followed by actions. Now, several other NATO members gave security guarantees. So they're all giving guarantees even before they're in, even before there's any legal obligation. But that's already been said. We complained about it when it was very clear about Ukraine. You know, they're not in NATO, so technically, but the technical stuff is just technical nonsense, I think, because even if there are commitments, you know, if we decide to do something else, we will. But technically, they're saying that they will be willing to defend these countries before they even get in and sign up. And I see that about the only thing that's going to limit this is when the dollar continues to the point where the value of the dollar is so low that we can't afford it.
And we're seeing that now. I drove by our friendly neighborhood Buc-ee's today, and I think it was almost $4.60 a gallon of gas. So I'm going to start skateboarding to work, I think, although that wouldn't be a wise idea. But put up that next picture of with Putin on it if you can, because this is from the Libertarian Institute, our good friends over there. And Putin threatens the multiple launch rocket system transfer to Ukraine will provoke strikes. UK announces shipment of M270 rocket launchers. So, and we did talk about this over the weekend. The US and the UK are sending over the multiple rocket launchers into Ukraine. Russia, from Medvedev to Lavrov, the foreign minister, to President Putin, the three of them have said, if these rockets hit Russian territory, there will be a response. We will hit decision-making centers and not necessarily just in Kiev. Very straightforward. They haven't bluffed thus far. Maybe they've decided to adopt our policy of bluffing, but thus far they haven't bluffed. Ukraine allegedly gave assurances to Washington that we're not going to hit Russia, and then literally a few hours later they said, well, we don't consider Crimea part of Russia, so that's going to be targeted. Well, Russia and the people of Crimea do consider themselves part of Russia, and so we're setting ourselves up for a real face-off, a real showdown, a real game of chicken, where the stakes are so high. And again, the question is, why? What's the purpose? What do we prove by doing this? And as Scott Ritter said in his speech, which hopefully we'll have up soon, the conclusion of this war has been over for a long time. Russia will win this war. So all we're doing now is causing more death and damage and destruction. And again, the question is why? What's the purpose?
You know, they give a reason why we're doing this, and the security guarantees are meant to prevent a Russian attack. So they think this is the prevention of the conflict. We see it differently. We see that when you're in there, because when the weapons got close in Ukraine, it was a precipitation.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anybody's ever proven that Russia, well, it would be hard to prove it since it's a supposition, that Russia, you know, decided to attack. And the way they saw them defending themselves against the weapons that that the West promised they wouldn't put up on the border. Yeah. But that's what this is, security guarantee meant to prevent. And yet at the same time, it looks to us it looks like it's a precipitation. And you know what I think they want in between? Just look risky, dangerous. They could, and that would serve the warmongers. That would serve the war profiteers, because they can still build the weapons, waste them. I think there was an article today about how many tanks that we sent over there were just recently destroyed by the Russians.
Yeah. And our military industrial complex loves that. But this reminds me, the point you just made reminds me of something. We did show it on the show, the clip, and I did discuss it in my speech at the conference, but this amazing clip between Stephen Walt, Michael McFaul, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, and Radek Sikorski, the former Polish prime minister. And in a nutshell, Stephen Walt said, hey, if we were never going to have Ukraine in NATO in the first place, why didn't we just say so and avoid all this conflict? And then Sikorski in the end said, well, if we back off NATO, Russia would have invaded. And Walt rightly pointed out, well, they did anyway, right? So that's exactly what you say. They actually did invade. So anyway, the next thing we want to talk about, a little bit of COVID stuff, and we haven't covered it too much in a while. And here's something that's been reported and it's been suppressed. So we're basically just reporting on something that happened.
Right, and this is a major, executive at Bayer.
Yeah.
And he's coming out, and he is saying, he's testifying, and there was a conference going on where at the World Health Organization, but he was revealing at least his opinion, and it appears there that he said this, and that's what we know. But because for me, it's plausible, that this is the case, that he says all along the plan was, and the vaccines was gene therapy. It was actually altering cells and the genes. And he says in this article that he's quoted saying that, probably 95% of the people wouldn't have taken it if they thought they were messing around like that, because it would have been a big shift from the usual understanding of what a vaccine does. So he was doing this. So this is getting awfully close to manipulation. This is not directly related, but the whole thing got started with this gain of function, messing around with viruses, and how did it happen, and how did it get it out of China? Was it in China? And that whole thing is, but I guess the shame is let's assume the truth is coming out. Let's say that there was gene manipulation, and what if the thing that Rand talked about a whole lot, there was some gain of function, and the real concern should be, did that virus escape and cause all this problem that we've been facing? But then again, the big issue is how do you deal with problems like this as a country, authoritarian, with lockdowns and all this nonsense? Just think of the economic harm that's still going on from this. And then on top of it, I'm always looking for a positive. So if people get this news and say, could they have been messing around with gene therapy, cellular therapy? And also the history now, the last 2 years, maybe people will ask more questions and not have to wait for the PTA parents to get together and say, hey, this is nonsense. What are you doing to us? And we don't want to hear from this anymore. So let's hope people are waking up to the truth. And this is a hint at something that should be continued to look at to see if anybody else is going to say these same things.
Yeah, this idea that we can't tell people it's this or that kind of therapy because nobody would get the shot. That reminds me of, remember what Fauci admitted, that, well, I wasn't really telling the truth on how many percent needed to get the shot for herd immunity because people never would have gone to get it if I said this or that and the other, so I reserved it for that. So I think it's just an example of how they lied about things. And we've been wanting to put this chart up, and I think it kind of fits in what we're saying because we're kind of looking back on COVID a little bit. Yeah, put that up. Now this is Johns Hopkins University, so this isn't some guy scratching on the back of a napkin. It's daily confirmed COVID-19 cases per million people. We don't know the reason this chart looks the way it does, but certainly something is happening. On the very bottom, you see that flat line with a couple of very tiny blips is India. India infections per million people has basically zero and has been zero. And we know, and we've talked about the fact that India is one of the lowest vaccinated countries on earth. And then that massive spike is Israel, and the medium spike is Portugal, which are two of the most vaccinated countries on earth. We don't know why, but this chart, the data from Johns Hopkins University, which we would assume is accurate, shows something that's not supposed to happen. The most vaccinated countries shouldn't have spikes. The least vaccinated countries should. That's clearly not what's happening. We don't know.
But if anybody would suggest it, now they might be able to be able to suggest something about natural immunity and not get put in prison.
Yeah.
But for a while you lost your job and everything else because they said that this is misinformation. But you know, it's interesting. Well, at the conference, this subject came up because one of the attendees came up and said he was from India.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. We were just talking about that chart, so we had a little conversation about this, and that was exactly his understanding. And the immunity rate is so high, and it was all natural, and it was better than all those vaccines. It's just think now the complications from the vaccine. Yeah. Now that's not speculation.
That's
the numbers are there.
Yeah.
CDC even kept track of some of them.
Yeah.
You know, of what kind of complications there were. But I thought it was rather interesting that we had somebody from India, and he was very proud of the fact that India, had that low rate of infections.
Yeah. Well, the last thing we want to just throw out there a little bit. It's kind of a funny thing, but it kind of indicates how things go. And let's put up that next one with our good friend Kim on the cover. Let's see if he's up here. Where's Kim? There he is. Is this the stupidest thing the UN has ever done? And we got this from Zero Hedge, and it comes by way of AmericanMilitaryNews.com. Last week, North Korea assumed control of the chair of the UN Conference on Disarmament. That's a little funny.
That's interesting because, I'm all for diplomacy, and
Yeah.
maybe this organization, maybe it'll come around. But not likely. Matter of fact, it makes me think that the silliness here, and it's amazing that, they pick North Korea to be in charge of disarmament. But it suggests two things to me. Why are we in these entangling alliances and paying all this money? What do? We prop up North Korea and get propaganda that they're anti-nuclear. But then again, on weapons control, and similar appointments like this have been happened before in weapons control. But what if they truly were? What if there was a group out there that was going to limit the spread of weapons around the world? We'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
But it would help us because we'd spend less money on the war industry and more money helping people, and maybe being invested in the economy and not needing to borrow and inflate the currency and do all the ridiculous things here. But I think that it is ironic and for Zero Hedge call, this is the stupidest thing the UN has ever done. I don't know. They might be right on that. But we can find some other stupid things. In 2020, what did they do? Had China was in charge of the Human Rights Commission, for a certain area and a certain group. Yeah, sure, they're going to protect us. But once again, I think that we should be a standard, but we should set an example. But this whole thing that we get in charge of NATO and United Nations and then don't set a good example and then they decide, well, we'll force this on them, that's exactly the opposite way. And besides, we don't even have a moral right to do it unless we've done a little bit of work ourselves, unless we have a system that's working where it wouldn't be necessary to use force, and use government force to make people do it, because people would say, and there was a time I think America was seen as an example, say, they're setting a very good example. Right now, we're still wealthy. And that's why they better be very careful, because our wealth is all based on debt and inflated currency. So they can't they can't say the United States should be emulated, and certainly we shouldn't be lecturing the United Nations. We should just be out of the United Nations.
Well, like you said before the show, on the surface you get a giggle out of the fact that North Korea is in head of disarmament, but then you start thinking and scratching your head that the U.S. is the biggest proliferator of weapons in the entire world. So maybe we shouldn't be on it either, which is a good excuse
Right.
to not be. But I want to thank our viewers. I want to thank all of our attendees at the conference in Houston. Again, it was a great event. It was such a treat to meet so many of you. I wish we could have spent more time talking. If you missed this one, don't worry. September 3rd in the Dulles Airport in Northern Virginia, the Dulles Airport area in Northern Virginia, and then back down here in Lake Jackson, Texas, November 5th. In September, we're going to look at the emergence of the police state and all the different examples from digital currency to your social credit score. We're going to explore that. And then back here in November, we're going to talk about the war on speech, which is also a big topic. So thanks again for watching the show, for coming out to our conferences. If you like what we do, and we're not compromising, right? We are the real deal when it comes to non-interventionism. You might go to ronpaulinstitute.org and make a tax-deductible donation to keep us going. We operate on a shoestring. We do a lot more than organizations with many, many times the size of our budget and staff. We do it because we work harder. So if you want to keep us going, we do appreciate your tax-deductible contribution. Back to you, Dr. Paul.
Very, very good. And I too want to once again thank our viewers, because we wouldn't have much of a program if we didn't have anybody that cared about it. And I think that we can be proud of what we're doing, and we get more people wanting to help every year. So it's something that we obviously will continue. You know, today we had some miscellaneous points that we wanted to make, but you know, the one thing that always comes through for me very clearly is so many of these problems, but it's really domestic economic things as well as international events, that we're embedded with people who want to regulate, write more regulations, get in entangling alliances. I think that's a great term to use, and that was one of the reasons we decided to have independent. Too many entangling alliances. We were not supposed to do that, and these problems just are so much entanglement. But like I say, you know, it's not going to last forever. So our job is to prepare as many people as possible, because believe me, it's not complicated. There's so many benefits from a society that follows the principles of liberty, both in the area of foreign policy and domestic policy, that I don't know why we keep we lose this argument, because what we stand for, I believe, is so far superior and so far above the typical morality of governments per se, and especially what's happening in Washington today. So once again, thank you very much for tuning in today to our program, and please return to the Liberty Report soon.